Hello, welcome to the HM Show. This is your host Harish. Looks like we are about to have another war, this time between NATO and Russia. Last few months have been really tough for Ukraine. They have been taking heavy losses across all battlefronts. Russia has been making steady advances.
Missiles in an overnight attack in Kyiv. At least 3 people were killed and about 10 injured. It was one of the biggest Russian attacks on the Ukrainian capital and the surrounding region since a full-scale war began over 3 years ago. Several other regions were also hit. This Sunday, the Kremlin claimed it had struck military airfields and other facilities in
When war started, Russia made early gains and was able to capture 20% of Ukrainian territory. Then Ukraine was able to hold further Russian advances and also gain strategic advantage in several battlefields due to increased support of advanced weapons from NATO and USA. In last 6 months, tables have turned. Russia has made several innovations, especially in their drone warfare, and they have now introduced a slew of drones which are smaller, cheaper and lethal. Their optic controlled first person view drones, or FPVs as they are called, they are wreaking havoc in the battlefield where nobody is safe anywhere.
Shoot down the Russian drone. Russian engineers are working on new drones. Soldiers from the 3rd Army's Azak Corps fell into a drone trap set by a Russian drone operator on the road. The drone, lying in wait on the road, struck a trailer-mounted motorcycle carrying 2 people. The drone operator then struck 4 members of the Azak Corps hiding among trees in the same direction. Continuation of a series of masterclasses on destroying enemy armored vehicles using fiber optic FPV UAVs. This time, an American M126 Stryker armored personnel carrier was destroyed. A Russian FPV drone operator attacked the armored vehicle with a total of 5 FPV drones. The pilot repeatedly fired at the same spot, destroying the cumulative protective grille and the side of the armored vehicle.
So the specter of Russian victory has clearly worried the NATO. It's like setting a cat among the pigeons. Now they are forced to come out in open and pick the gauntlet themselves. So unless you are living in a cave, you can analyze the signals which are present all over the place. So let's analyze it together. So the first clear signal is Trump agreeing to shoot Russian jets.
That NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
That was a pretty big statement. What might it mean? It has become quite realistic to assume that NATO would shoot down a Russian aircraft, particularly a drone, but even a manned aircraft if it encroached on NATO airspace. Because in the last couple of weeks we've seen a lot of encroachment. So we saw 19 drones into Poland, we saw a drone into Romania, and particularly 3 Russian MiG-31s flying into Estonian airspace. NATO won't always just shepherd these vehicles out of its airspace. It's said, repeat, that if these encroachments continue, they'll have to shoot something down.
Our message to the Russians is clear. We will defend every inch of Allied territory.
So till date, US and NATO were wary of a direct confrontation with Russia, but now all bets are off. So another signal is US marshalling its resources. Recently, a very interesting thing has happened. The Department of Defense of America, which used to be called as Department of War from 1789 till 1947, has been rechristened as Department of War. And this gentleman, Mr. Pete Hegseth, he has recently called the meeting of all his generals, some 800 plus senior staff in Virginia. Let's have a look at it.
Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered hundreds of top military leaders to gather at a Marine Corps base in Virginia next week. It's not clear why the meeting has been called. More than a dozen people familiar with the matter telling the Washington Post the directive was sent to nearly every top U.S. military commander around the world. That includes officials in conflict zones stationed throughout Europe, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific region. According to the Post, every source it spoke with said it could not recall a defense secretary ever ordering such a large gathering of military leaders on such short notice. Joining us now,
Senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett tells us it's a rare event, if not unprecedented move.
CBS News has learned that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has directed numerous generals and admirals, as well as some of their staff from around.
So as we record this video, Trump and Pete Hegseth have already spoken to the generals in the first round of meeting, which was in camera. Now obviously what transpires between closed doors is anybody's guess. Now let's go to the third and very important signal. Europe is preparing for war. And how do we know that? Several countries in Europe have asked their hospitals to be ready for casualties. Let's have a look at the report.
Hospitals across France have reportedly been told to prepare for a potential armed conflict by next year, with the government urging health providers to be ready. According to French media, in a leaked letter sent to health agencies across the country, the government says hospitals should be prepared for a major military engagement as soon as March 2026. It said that between 10,000 and 50,000 men could be expected in French hospitals over a 6-month period, which could include foreign soldiers who are coordinated with NATO and the EU. They are planning medical transit centres to make use of regional facilities and to distribute patients arriving from potential front lines. According to the reports, doctors are also being warned to prepare for shortages. The French health minister hasn't denied the letter and stressed it was a precautionary measure, but that aggression from some actors means the country needs to prepare for the worst. It comes months after the government announced a survival manual, which is set to be sent to every household in the country. The 20-page booklet is said to include details of what to do in a variety of emergencies, including nuclear blasts and natural disasters. And
so I'm sure this 20-page booklet will help prepare the European citizens in eventuality of a nuclear attack. Let's see how these countries go about their business.
Contains a survival kit packing list, which includes water, tinned food, paracetamol, and a torch.
We saw what US and Europe are doing. Now let's see what Russia is doing. Russia is increasing its battle ranks. It has asked for increased military conscription.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched the biggest autumn conscription drive since 2016. In the latest draft, Putin has ordered 135,000 men to volunteer for compulsory military service in Russia. This is part of Russia's autumn conscription drive. Russia holds 2 conscription drives each year, spring and autumn. Under these drives, men aged 18 to 30 required to serve for 12 months. Typically, more men are drafted in the spring when students finish school or university. And
so there is another angle to it. Of late, several propaganda handles of West in social media have started attacking China. So let's have a look at it.
Taiwan. Well, according to the Royal United Services Institute, yeah, they are. China has been signaling it wants to take Taiwan by 2027. Xi Jinping has told his army to be ready to take Taiwan by then. They are building the landing ships. It's going to happen. But doing so would be extremely difficult, especially the landing and securing key airfields. And you take a look at Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine share a land border, and Russia still has trouble getting supplies over to Ukraine. Now imagine you add a sea on top of that. It makes it even harder.
startling report from the Royal United Services Institute, that's a respected think tank based in London, says Russia is quietly helping China prepare for the potential invasion of Taiwan. Because, of course, that's what the world needs, another belligerent power invading another country. A little background here to put things in context. Analysts...
So you might be wondering why exactly I'm showing these YouTubers. So these are signals of an impending attack. The China part is all rationalization. Punitive action or operations can be carried out against China as well.
I believe that a Chinese assault on Taiwan would be among the most difficult and risky military operations in modern history.
Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story. A new report says Russia is reportedly boosting China's ability to take Taiwan. How Russia's battlefield know-how could boost China's forces.
In addition to the previous points, Trump wants Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan so that he could position his forces there, which could take action, punitive action, if required, against China. So before we discuss the possibility of NATO and Russia war, let's understand the China angle. Europe and America have understood from the experience of last 3 years in Ukraine that it's difficult to defeat Russia unless its umbilical cords with China is severe. Russia is now getting a lot of industrial goods from China, which is helping support and sustain its war efforts in Ukraine. All its advances in drone and other spheres, the raw material, the necessary inputs have come from China. So if NATO wishes to defeat Russia, it will be important that China is kept at bay. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Have you ever wondered why this war is happening in the first place? What is the rationale for it? You'll be surprised to hear the answer. It's very simple. The reason is the same which has caused war since eternity. It's this. Yes. Resources. Minerals. So this is the reason for the war. You'll be surprised to know the genesis of war in Ukraine. It's a mess created by USA. Uncle Sam. So it's a result of years of efforts by CIA to take control of Ukraine. You might ask, why is that so? Why would America and West want to control Ukraine? The answer is not very difficult as well here. It's this. Europe needs food security. Ukraine has been known as the breadbasket of Europe since last several decades, and Europe wants to gain control of Ukraine for its food security. So post collapse of USSR, West and its deep state actors started a long-term campaign to wean Ukraine away from Russian sphere of influence. Let's have a look at these reports.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, Victoria Nuland. Victoria just recently returned from Kiev and has an update on the situation there, as well as the U.S. government position. Victoria?
Way forward. The Ukrainian parliament has already passed some 18 separate pieces of required legislation in advance of the Eastern Partnership Summit in Vilnius. Although that was a missed opportunity, it would be a huge shame to see 5 years' worth of work and preparation go to waste if the AA is not signed in the near future. So it is time to finish the job. As Vice President...
Just to give a context of this speech by Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State in charge of Europe and Eurasia, she is giving this speech in 2013 December, and she is recounting her experience of Ukraine there. You need to listen to her words very carefully, how desperate she sounds. And by February 2014, the then president of Ukraine, Yanukovych, was ousted in a coup, supported and funded by America.
Biden said in remarks last night, President Yanukovych has a choice. He can choose the path that leads to division and isolation, or he can take a leap and take immediate, tangible steps to defuse his country's crisis and start a genuine dialogue with the opposition and agree on a path that returns Ukraine to economic and political health. We've invested over $5 billion to assist Ukraine in these and other goals that will ensure a secure.
So I hope you paid attention to this line where Victoria Nuland clearly mentions that America has spent $5 billion in last 5 years. This speech was in 2013. So from 2008 onwards, America had been funding various non-state actors for this eventuality, that is to wean Ukraine away from Russian influence.
Secure and prosperous and democratic Ukraine. Today, there are senior officials in the Ukrainian government, in the business community, as well as in the opposition, civil society, and the religious community who believe in this democratic and European future for their country. And they've been working hard to move their country and their president in the right direction. We urge.
Apparently, the President Yanukovych did not listen to the plans of CIA, and he was promptly dispatched from the country through a coup. So now let's listen to a very important discussion between Robert Parry and the news anchor of the Real News Network, where Robert Parry clearly mentions the role of CIA and America in disposing the democratically elected government in Ukraine in 2014.
Volatile region. European countries, the United States, have threatened political and economic sanctions, and officials have denounced the Russian intervention as a violation of international law. According to some reports, the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet has demanded Ukrainian military forces in the region surrender or face military assault, but the Russian Defense Ministry has denied this. Now joining us to discuss this is Robert Parry. He's a renowned investigative journalist, founder and editor of consortiumnews.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
So let's first start by addressing this move by the Russians. Is it a violation of international law? And they've justified it by saying there's a humanitarian crisis. Is there any indication to support this?
Well, I think it seems like international law is almost depends on the eye of the beholder at this point. We have, in the case of Ukraine, a democratically elected leader, Yanukovych, who was overthrown by a coup d'etat that was spearheaded by neo-Nazi militias after he'd agreed to move up the elections so people could even vote him out of office if they wished. That led to his being forced to flee, and sort of rump parliament began to pass a bunch of laws while some of these neo-Nazi militias controlled the government buildings. So I think how you look at this depends on whether you consider President Yanukovych still a legitimate elected leader of the country. He has asked for Russian help, and the situation with Ukraine is a bit complicated in that Crimea was historically part of Russia. It was only moved into Ukraine as part of a procedural matter when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. So it's a much more mixed situation, I suppose, than, say, the U.S. invading Iraq back in 2003, which was more clearly a violation of international law.
And so talk about what the West's role has been in this, especially the United States and Germany, which is another player in this whole affair that hasn't gotten as much attention.
Well, the United States has been trying to pry Ukraine away from a close relationship with Russia. Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland said in December to a group of business leaders that the United States had invested $5 billion, she said, in helping Ukraine achieve its European aspirations, that is, moving it away from Russia into the EU. So obviously the United States has played a role in trying to achieve this anti-democratic transition.
So this is a very interesting conversation. What I'm showing is a part of a larger discussion. I would request you to search the internet and have a look at this discussion yourself. So this is another conversation which happened after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Their RT anchor is talking to a senator and ex-general of America. So let's have a look at this discussion.
It's Russia's military operation. Of course, we've heard from the Western powers, they call it an invasion, say that Russia attacked Ukraine without provocation, but Russia has always said that it was the West and NATO and Ukraine that provoked this conflict. So what's your assessment of those different positions?
Well, this war was planned at least as early as 2014, when the Central Intelligence Agency and British intelligence, MI6, worked with the demonstrators in Kiev and overthrew the duly elected government of President Yanukovych. At that point, the United States, and this is under the President Obama's administration, they began flooding Ukraine with weapons with which to kill Russians in Russia and Russians in the Donbass. And the Ukrainian people, I don't think were anxious to have this conflict, but the CIA had decided it was going to be done. The CIA actually put in place the members of the new revolutionary junta that took power in Ukraine. And from that point forward, I think the U.S. and NATO have orchestrated this. President Putin made desperate efforts to ward off a war. They began back even before the Obama administration. During the Bush administration, there was a leaked
So if you listen to this conversation and the previous conversations, what you can gather is that West has been relentless in its pursuit of strategic objectives. And in spite of all the pushback from various quarters, they have continued. Today, millions of lives are lost. Entire Ukraine is devastated. Russia is considerably strained, and all for some strategic gains.
Classified cable that came from the U.S. ambassador to Moscow, Ambassador William J. Burns. He sent a very strongly worded cable in which he said that Russia would view further eastward expansion towards into the Ukraine as a military threat. What was happening is that NATO was beginning to talk about the Ukraine joining NATO, which would have presented an existential threat to the survival of the Russian nation. And so they knew precisely what was going to happen. They knew that Russia would be forced into making a decision on whether to intervene.
Russia is the largest country in the world in terms of land mass, but it has got a relatively small population and declining population due to lower birth rates. Economically, it's also a minor power. So all these points make it a fit case for intervention from people who are interested in securing its reserves of minerals and other natural resources. For long, USA and West have been eyeing to balkanize Russia and gain control of its reserves. If they are able to do it, it would secure the prosperity of Western nations for another 200 years. By pitting the two nations with resources against each other, the objective is to weaken them both and gain control of their resources for its own strategic objectives. In this Russo-Ukraine war, let's make no mistakes. NATO is already fighting this war, but it has been fighting a proxy war by using its money and American weapons. With Trump finally on board, NATO has now the gumption to directly intervene and move the boots on ground. So who will be the actors now? It will be the European money with boots on ground, American weapon against Russia in the short run. In the long run, what will happen? Difficult to predict. But whatever happens, we will keep an eye on it and we'll let you know in time. Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. If you like this content, request you to help us by subscribing the channel and liking the video, and also sharing it with your friends. All these actions of yours goes a long way in helping us grow. Thank you.